Speakers can be one of the most excruciating decisions when you're building a home theater. They can absolutely make or break the performance of your entire system, and they're completely subject to room placement, room construction, and treatment, and just about every other thing that comes before or after them in the signal chain. So, how do you decide what to go with? In today's real-world review, we're talking about a brand new line of cinema speakers from NextLevel Acoustics, the Reference Cinema series. NextLevel Acoustics has been around for a while now, based out of New England, and they're mainly known for their high-end soundbar offerings. But the company makes a full product line, over 40 different speaker solutions, including bookshelves, in-walls, in-ceilings, and subs, and they've recently added the Reference Cinema series to the list, which can be configured as an in-wall or on-wall speaker. Like the rest of the product line, the Reference Cinemas are designed by industry veteran John Salcido, who is well known for his infinite slope crossover technology and audiophile-grade speaker designs. The Reference Cinema speaker is a two-way design with dual 8-inch woofers above and below a 4x4 horn tweeter. The speaker has a frequency response of 50 Hz to 20 kHz, sensitivity of 96 dB at 4 ohms, and a reported max SPL of 118 dB at 2 meters. This is a very sonically dynamic speaker. Visually, there's not much to talk about. It's a 6-inch deep MDF box for both the on-wall and the in-wall design, so they're going to require more than 2x4 framing for in-walls. They're coated in a black Duratex finish, the grill's attached with strong magnets, and NextLevel Acoustics offers custom grill fabrics and colors to blend with your decor. The speakers are visually unassuming, which I guess may be actually something worth talking about. When you're normally discussing a typical MTM cinema style speaker with this type of output, generally, you're talking about something much, much larger. Specifically much deeper, generally 12 inches deep or more, which translates into a bigger footprint and a lot more weight. Using 8-inch drivers and an intuitive crossover design allows NextLevel to pack a very dynamic punch into a drastically smaller footprint, allowing the in-wall or on-wall application that just isn't an option with most speakers of this type. I've had many different speakers in my theater rooms over the years. Started with NHT, moving to B&W bookshelves, then to some custom-built MTM cinema style speakers with 6-inch drivers and a different dispersion pattern on the horn style tweeters. I've always loved the imaging capability of a good horn and the dynamics that they can provide. I've also been turned off by many horns because the upper mid-range can be fatiguing, abrasive, and downright painful when they're not properly calibrated. Which is why I ended up getting rid of my MTMs for a set of triad in-walls. The silky smooth, mellow sound of those tweeters was a welcome break from what I had been using. And I still love those triad speakers. They have a fantastic sound and character. But then we moved. And when I set up the theater here, it's a totally different room with different construction elements, and the triads just weren't meshing with the sub and the room acoustics as well as they had before. So when NextLevel Acoustics reached out with an offer to review their new line, I was obviously intrigued and interested. I was able to get a listen to these speakers at CEDIA this year in Dallas, and my initial notes included things like, it sounds like there are wide channels installed, but there's not. And the imaging of these speakers is fantastic. But also, I couldn't help but notice a sharp peak in the upper mid-range, which is common to horn speakers, and I'm very sensitive to it. So when the set of Reference Cinema speakers arrived straight from CEDIA in Dallas, the first thing I did was fire up REW and Anthem's Arc Genesis. Right before I removed the triads from my setup, I took some REW measurements, and now I typically run my Anthem's room correction several times, tweak the settings, try and try again, and then finally I'll just turn it off. I always feel like it ends up just sucking all the life out of my system, and I'd rather treat the room. So I took measurements with the triads without ARC turned on, and then I installed the Reference Cinema speakers, and I took measurements without ARC turned on. I ran a single default pass of ARC, and then I spent a couple days listening with and without the room correction engaged. I've often said in my reviews that I don't watch pixels and I don't listen to frequency sweeps and frequency curves, but to avoid just talking in metaphors and cliches, I give you graphs just to see the differences and have a basis to work from with my comments. Pay no attention to the finer detail, the high-end dip. That's on purpose because my room still isn't fully treated. I just want to point out the major bumps and dips in the upper mid-range. These graphs are center channel only. Look at the triads. The real peak and valley comes between 1500 and 6000 K. And remember, this is without ARC engaged. I tried to correct this, but getting that leveled out just sucked all the energy out of the entire system. Bringing in the NextLevel Acoustics measurement, you'll see that it's far from flat, but that trouble spot is better out of the gate, but there is a pretty hot peak at 4K. But after spending a few hours with REW, take a look here. I was able to flatten that peak at 4K out, maybe even a little too much. And making this adjustment, unlike with the triads, didn't suck all the life out of the system. It still has a ton of dynamics and a really cohesive soundstage. I'm pretty happy with the way everything's sounding, and I know as I continue to treat my room, I'll be able to back this ARC adjustment off even more and really open things up dramatically. Basically, it appears that the Reference Cinema speakers really take well to room correction. They can correct easily, allowing for really fine-tuning areas you'd like to improve while not decreasing the accuracy of the rest of your curve and without shrinking your imaging. Once I had this ARC profile set up, it was time to really start listening. I started with the clips I had seen on repeat over and over at Cedia, from Maverick, Blade Runner 2049, Bohemian Rhapsody, Ready Player One, and so on. I'd also watched these same clips several times upon returning from Cedia with my triads, so I'm very familiar with how they can sound and how they should sound when played back on some of the highest quality equipment on the market today. The first thing I noticed is how much better and easier these blend with my sub. I have an SVS PB2000 12-inch sub, and the first thing that drew me to the Reference Cinema speakers was the 8-inch drivers versus the 5¼ inch in my Triad LCRs. Needless to say, the NextLevels have no problem dropping lower to create that mesh with the sub. They're rated down to 50 Hz. I have my crossover set at 60, and there is no problem. There's plenty of authority in the low end that the transition is really just seamless. The additional benefit here is more realistic sounding male voices. I was able to really dial in the low end, so that big climactic scene of Bohemian Rhapsody when they're playing at Wembley, the kick drum thumps your chest, but it isn't bloated and boomy. The music mix is smooth and accurate, and it sounds like a live show. The other thing that really stands out to me about the Reference Cinema speakers is how dynamic they are. They're super quick to respond when the amp gives them a quick jolt. Gunfire is incredibly realistic sounding. The dynamics combined with the imaging create a fantastic effect of hearing a gunfire and a bullet whizzing by. It's really like they're flying through the room, not across a path that perfectly aligns with your speaker layout. The imaging is fantastic, as I expected. I'm excited and newly motivated to finish treating the reflections in my room so that I can push myself to make a decision on ceiling channels, even though the imaging in these speakers does a really nice job of emulating immersive channels. There's no shortage of sounds flying through my room already, and the precision is impressive. Not just imaging between two speakers, but also imaging across the vertical plane. There's a distinct movement up and down. Sounds aren't just coming from behind us, they're behind and above or behind and down low. Imaging for days. With the Reference Cinemas in my system, I feel like the sound is closer to a mixing stage than I've ever had. Incredibly accurate, precise, and voices are all very intelligible, even in less than pristine soundtracks. I've honestly lost track of everything I've watched. I feel like I've watched at least a clip of everything on my Kaleidoscape, even dug into the old Plex library a bit. I keep expecting to find something that'll trip them up and sound harsh or abrasive. Nope, not yet. If you know me or have watched any of my videos, you probably know that I'm a bit of a concert film fanatic. I grew up watching these shows on VHS, and I still love them. Pink Floyd's The Delicate Sound of Thunder is one of my all-time favorites. I was finally able to retire my Laserdisc after it was remixed, re-edited, and remastered from all the original 35mm source materials. Kaleidoscape has it in 4K and 5.1 surround, and it's just tremendous. I'm not even that big of a Pink Floyd fan, to be honest, but it's just such a fantastic show, and the NextLevel Acoustics speakers brought it to yet another new level. The crack of Steve Jordan's snare drum during the blues trio set of John Mayer's Where the Light Is just perfect. Mayer's Hendrix-style Strat tone is spot-on accurate, but it does walk the line where it could cross over into abrasive. But after an hour, it doesn't. And Muse's Simulation Theory has skyrocketed into my top 3 concerts lately, and it sounds just huge on these speakers. This is a prime example of where the integration between the sub and the reference cinemas is perfection. Previously, there was a hole in this mix that made it sound a little disjointed, but now, perfect presentation. There's amazing low end in this show. Getting into the movies, I've watched a bunch. Top Gun Maverick has a fantastic surround mix. I noticed a few things on the reference cinemas that I hadn't heard before, like the clock ticking above during Maverick's first meeting with Cyclone. Men in Black has always been a fun mix for me, from the Danny Elfman soundtrack to Barry Sonnenfeld's passion for using low bass effects. I've watched this movie at least once a year since it came out, and it's never sounded this good. Bullet Train is one that I watched just before dialing in ARC and right after dialing in that preset. And even though it sounded great without any correction employed, it's a great test of directionality and dynamics, not to mention a really fun movie to watch. The presentation, once the room correction was dialed in, passed all my tests with flying colors. The one movie I thought would really trip it up is Point Break. We watched it several weeks ago via Kaleidoscape, and it was really abrasive and fatiguing on the triads. So much so that I found myself really wishing for a remastered re-release. Playing a few scenes on the next levels proved that it doesn't sound as bad as I actually thought. Still not a perfect mix by any means, but it wasn't painful or tiring, and in fact, it became really enjoyable. Digging back further, we watched E.T. and The Godfather Part 2. Oftentimes films from the 70s and 80s don't have the best audio mixes on a home system, but again, these were downright pleasant to experience. The list goes on. We've really been watching a lot of movies lately. Jackie Brown, American Psycho, The Black Phone, Vengeance, Free Guy, Lamb, Men. I haven't found anything that hasn't sounded great on these speakers. The NextLevel Acoustics Reference Cinema line of speakers is a high-quality, great-sounding speaker that fills a void in the market. It's a cinema-style MTM horn speaker that doesn't carry with it a huge space requirement or a huge price tag. I tried and failed to find another speaker of this design with 8-inch drivers or an in-wall, on-wall form factor. And I'll get this out of the way right now. I'm not sending them back. They'll be replacing the triads in my home theater from this point on. They're the perfect match for my needs. The NextLevel Acoustics on-wall reference cinema speakers are wall-mounted inside my false wall without taking up valuable floor space. My front wall is framed with 2x4s directly against the actual wall, so I simply just added a spacer to bring my Seymour screen out a little further to avoid making contact with the front of the speakers. And other than that, no modifications were necessary. The surround channels are mounted just behind the seating area and draw little attention to themselves, which is exactly what I want in my theater. All focus on the screen. If you have the time and the skills to fine-tune these reference cinema speakers with your room correction software, it doesn't take much to even things out, and they will absolutely deliver in terms of accuracy, speed, impact, and imaging. They're easier to dial in and manipulate than any other speaker I've owned. And the less you give your room correction to work on, the better everything's going to sound. These are an ideal speaker for anyone who really wants that cinema speaker sound profile and dynamics in their home theater room, but maybe they don't have the space to give up 1.5 feet for their screen wall. They're efficient, easily driven to an output level great enough to fill most home theater rooms. Visually, the NextLevel Reference Cinema speakers don't scream out for your attention. Sonically, they refuse to be ignored. And that wraps up my thoughts on these speakers. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments or over on avnirvana.com. I'll be happy to address any questions as best I can. Thank you so much for watching today. As always, please hit that like and subscribe button while you're here, and I'll see you again real soon with another real world review.